It
button.
no, I don't know. Hi everybody. What? Sorry, John confused me. Hello everybody. Welcome to Ramblemancy. We're here tonight.
Tonight on Ramblemancy, John throws Lucas under the bus.
This is, don't mind my deer in the headlights look when going live. John just asked me a whole bunch of nonsensical questions right before I hit the button. Um, Hello, everybody. Welcome to tonight's episode of Ramblemancy. Tonight we are joined by Steve. Steve, welcome. We're gonna be here talking about TTRPGs, just sort of all kinds of general TTRPG nonsense that we're gonna be talking. It's good to have you on finally. I was just saying, just right before we went live, we were trying to have Steve on for a really long time. And then, the everything happened, and here we are months later. But we finally did it. We did it. So, welcome.
Well, thank you. I'm very, very, very happy to be here. As I was saying earlier, this is one of the channels I really started watching a lot when I started watching TTRPGs, live plays, and everything like that, and found Infinite Horizons from Caitlin being on here, and it's being on one of those shows. You're like, man, it's just friends just get hanging out on the internet talking about shows. I'm like, God, that'd be so cool. And they're like, hey, do you want to come on? I'll check my schedule. Yes.
Yeah, I'll just
yes.
let me see if I'm free.
What is it? Yeah.
I mean, yeah, basically, literally right now, you just retold the entire origin story of Ramblemancy. That is what it's about. So, but yeah.
It is. Ramblemancy is one of our favorite pieces of content that we make because it is just, it's the perfect excuse that I know to do something that this group of friends really loves to do, which is to sit around and talk about nerdy shit. It's a great way to do it.
Absolutely. So yeah, welcome on in, everybody. I'm Koala. You're have a good lurk.
Oh, Koala's here. Sorry, if I gotta actually head out. So.
All right, good night, everyone. Thanks for coming.
There's gonna be a
really
big
great
fight
show.
on
Really
stream.
excited.
Even on stream, the bit must endure.
The bit, yes, indeed. All right. Well, I don't actually have more in terms of announcements today. Although my announcement is sort of like a soft announcement, and it's not even about this channel. As many of you may have seen over the course of this week, it was just announced I'm going to be in a Star Trek Adventures actual play. It has been announced. Stay tuned for the exact specific dates because we're still kind of working that out. But I'm going to be in a Star Trek Adventure stream, Star Trek Intelligence. So I'll get, stay tuned. I'm definitely going to be talking more about it and, as we get closer to it, and talking about, when and where you can watch it. So I'm very excited, but that's really the only announcement we have. Otherwise, Ramblemancy, that's what we got here on this channel. So, but yeah, if you want to see the announcement trailer, I believe it was posted in our personal projects a few days ago. Yeah, so it's in there. So, but yeah, just keep an eye out. I'll be talking about it as we get closer. So, all right. So, John, what do you got for us tonight?
God damn it! I've been sitting here trying to come up with what felt like a good question to start us off with, and as usual, I have been completely blindsided by the show beginning, as happens literally every Friday at about 8:09 p.m.
Yeah.
No, I think so. Tonight's topic is one I think that is kind of evergreen for us. We love talking about tabletop RPGs and actual plays, and it's something that we all are interested in. And it's one of those things that I think is a conversation that is evergreen because every time we have somebody new on that does this, that makes shows, everybody has kind of their own little way of doing things, things that they've discovered. And I think it's a fun way to kind of just sit and talk shop. Whether that's about GMing, or whether that's running shows or producing things or running a channel, I don't know. It's a topic that I do sincerely enjoy revisiting, and especially because we've been doing it for a little while, it's always fun to have somebody who's kind of new to it. So I suppose I can pitch a question to Steve here that's just been that is more or less like, what's it been like getting into the streaming side of live plays and tabletop RPGs? How's that transition from like playing games and watching games to streaming games gone?
I think I remember specifically the first time when I ran stealing stories for the devil on R&R Rainbows and Razor Blades, and it's like, and I had Jake there, and I had DK from Exquisite Corpse, and these people that I absolutely am impressed with, and I'm happy to have this really strong crew. I'm like, great. And then I wrote an intro, so I knew I wouldn't, completely fall flat on my face and just stare off into space trying to think of something to say. And then we're like 15 minutes in, like 5-10 minutes in, and then I'm like, I can't pull the ripcord. Like, like
I'm
when,
too deep.
like I had done on R&R, I got on. That was my first time I was playing as a player, and if you're a little nervous, you can just kind of hang in the background and just feel stuff out, and then just kind of come in with stuff, and then you're rolling and you're doing your character. When you're the GM, it's like there's no ripcord. Like you can't just sit back. And I was like, oh shit. and so you just have to, you go like, you just got to, yeah, you just got to do it. Like you just got to just keep it moving. And luckily with Stealing Stories is it's all built on yes and. It's 100% built on yes and. I don't have to roll any dice. The players are the only ones rolling dice. I'm just telling them what to roll, and having them tell me what their characters do. And if I have an NPC, just go completely over the top with it and hope it lands, kind of like I did with kobolds. And they're like, we're going to go buy bagels. We are going to have the most like over the top bagel salesman that we can in the world. And here we go.
It's like
So
it becomes Harold and Kumar go to the Bagel Shack or something. I don't.
pretty much did turn into that. And so it's getting used to that. And I, due to the ongoing pandemic, as I had gotten used to working from home and sitting in front of a computer, so it wasn't, that part wasn't. But the amount of help I was able to get from people was just staggering. The amount of help from Jake, from Lucas, from John, from all of you, Jake's like, I'm like, for editing stuff, and Jake had a stream. He's like, I use this, I use DaVinci, and it's free. And I'm like, okay. I'm like, can I start cutting up your stuff and posting it? He's like, yes. And then so I start cutting up Rule of Lore stuff, and I start doing that. And that's one of the first things that started getting me followers is just clipping stuff that I enjoy and putting it out there and just sharing it with people. Like Lucas was kind enough, you sent me, I couldn't find the Goblins Christmas one. And so I'm like,
Yeah.
I have to get Jake's running gag of eating.
That is one of my favorite supercuts still today.
Yeah,
Of
and
like,
I'm like, you're like, yes, I will send you the, I'll send you the private, I'll send you the YouTube link. And so it's amazing. I've heard so many horror stories of people getting into groups and things and just having this terrible,
yeah,
like just meeting, just I don't like back alley D&D games or something where someone's getting, I mean, but just horrible, just rude people, and just misogynistic and homophobic and racist and all this other
yeah,
kinds of stuff. And luckily I landed on Q Times, I landed here, and Rainbows and Razor Blades and Exquisite Corpse, like like the four main channels I look at. I'm like, people are just so nice. What did this happen?
yeah, yeah,
And so because people post stuff all the time, like this terrible things about how they were used or taken advantage of, and I'm, damn, and so I'm like, so yeah, for me, I made the mistake. I would say the biggest mistake I made is I got excited and I was signing up for stuff and running stuff, and there was 1 or 2 weeks where 5 out of the 7 days I'm playing in something, running something, and then I had like, and one of those was also like a home game too. And most of the stuff is all West Coast, so it's 2 or 3 hours later. And
yeah.
so, and I was just like, this stopped being fun. Like it was still fun when I did the thing, but you get an hour before and you're like, oh God, why? Why?
Yeah.
I have to do imagination. I have to do imagination again.
That's a really good point. I mean, like, genuinely, so much of this is learning how to like manage your time, you know?
Hmm.
Because like
Yeah.
you can so I was surprised when we first started out how quickly I was able to just fill up my time. And still not feel like I was getting the things done that I wanted to get done. And like it just gets so out of hand, and if you're not prepared for that, it just takes over. And like there were many times where I really had to like pump my brakes and step back, because yeah, it's shocking how quickly this can get out of hand.
Well, and as a viewer, like, like stream punks are gonna go like take a break during December, or Power Play goes on break for like 2 months, or Rule of Lore goes on break for a couple months. You're like, but but Lucas, why? Like, just make with the NPC, buddy. Like, what's going on here? Like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Like, I need space stuff. Like, what am I supposed to do? Rewatch stuff? Reruns? What is this? The 80s?
Yet another way we've managed to reinvent cable.
And so I did. I went and rewatched.
Yeah.
But yeah, and so you like, even doing this for I've only doing this for a year, and it's
Mhm.
like, I get it. Like, I had to cancel my home game. It was the first campaign I started with, and I just found people on the Streampunk server, and I was like, I've never run a D&D campaign before. Does anyone want to play? And I had 4 people that are like, yeah, we want to play. Oh shit, okay. And I did for like 6-8 months,
Mhm.
and then I started doing stream games and short series, and I found I'm a better short series GM than I am a campaign.
Mhm.
Like, and that's one of my biggest questions for campaign GMs, like Lucas, is how you keep this, how you keep the steam going, of like, how do you continue, how you continually just keep pushing the envelope and moving through stuff. And now I'm seeing more why you do seasons,
Mhm.
and why you do arcs and things like that, so you can get a restart. But man, I I've started finding my stride in like like four show,
Mhm.
short series, like 4 to 6 show series, like,
Yeah.
are seem to be my bread and butter, which I think as a new GM that's going to be. But yeah, I don't know how, like, that would be my biggest question for a campaign GM, is how, how you keep the magic alive, baby. Like, how, like, to be, I can't put it. Exactly what I'm asking, but
Yeah.
my word vomit's coming out. So yeah.
The weird thing is, as to answer your question, I don't know if I'm the right person to answer that, because like I think I'm one of those people. I think that's just kind of how my brain works. Like that is just like my brain just functions in like the like I go long term, and that's how it is as like both a player and as a GM. Like I'm the same way either way, right? Like, and John can tell you, because I've been a player in his games before. He's been a player in my games. Freeman has also been a player in my games, and they both know that I write for the long term. Like whether I'm talking whether like I play the long game literally, um, and like that's both with plots as a GM, but also with like character development as a player, which is one of the reasons why I hate one shots. I won't do them. I won't do them. I've like flirted with one shots here and there, and I have had a terrible experience every single time. Even when it was a good experience as a one shot, it was still a bad experience as a TTRPG. Not because of like the game or anything that was happening in the game, but it's just because like that's just not how like my brain works. I don't do short term. I think long term, and that's see that sounds like I'm saying a good thing, and it is sometimes. The problem is I am the trade-off is that I am incapable of thinking in the short term when it comes to like writing. And so like John can tell you, for like behind the scenes here with like writer's room, the whole reason I have a writer's room is because I am incapable of certain kinds of thinking when planning stuff. So like I don't know if I'm the right person to ask to answer that question, because I don't
Yeah.
think I can tell you anything useful. Because for me, I'm just like that's just how my brain works. So like
But that's like literally the perfect answer for you though. You're
Mm-hmm.
like it is an innate thing in me that I find joy in that.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Like and that is literally actually a great answer. Like it may not be, if you can't find the steam to keep going that, then don't bang your head against the wall.
Yeah.
Play your thing. But like you said, you've still done amazing short-term ones. Thunder and Blood, Tomorrow's Dead. Those were all like I could have
Yeah.
watched Tomorrow's Dead for months, and that it was like one of the times like, oh, dope. We got a campaign. Like, no, it's going to be a couple. What the what? I have
Yeah.
to see crying
Meet my
teenagers like
meet my
multiple more
son
weeks.
Pete back.
Yeah. No, and like that, it is true. Like I found sort of a compromise in like the short run, right? Because like I do think in sort of long term, sort of longer, more convoluted plots. Convoluted is the wrong word, but more just involved plots.
Yeah,
And I do think more in those terms, and I've sort of found a kind of compromise because as we found with Infinite Horizon, unfortunately, the steam does sometimes run out, especially I think it's especially on streamed campaigns, especially like you watch Critical Role and even they are changing the way that they do. They're the ones who have always historically done the long-term campaign whatever. Even they are changing how they do that because like you just kind of run out of steam, and I think it's way easier to do with a streamed like production. It's way easier to run out of steam that way, and that's
Yeah.
unfortunately the mistake that we made with Infinite Horizon is not realizing the fact that uh, that you know it was not the same as running a long-term campaign because we're also adding this performative and also production component to it, and so it would be in like it would be exponentially easier to run out of steam on that. And so like the compromise that we've found, that I have found for myself creatively and also just sort of practically on the channel, is to do sort of more shorter runs of things.
Mhm.
So yeah, so like I definitely I empathize with the whole like short, sort of 3, 4, 5, upwards of like 5 to 10 session games, because it's like it kind of hits that sweet spot between the long term being able to get sort of more complex storylines going and also not burning yourself out. And so
Yeah. And like
yeah,
burnout is one of I think the most insidious things in many creative endeavors, but I think especially in doing this because it's something that we all like, right? And theoretically, there's a bunch of stuff that's very enjoyable about it. But there's also a lot of, as Lucas mentioned earlier, a million ways to fill up your time. And when you're talking about a show that has a question mark for the end point, that's just kind of ongoing, like all of the things that it takes to maintenance that show, like to to not just like keep it going, but also to keep people interested, to maintain like your audience's interest, to keep pulling in new people. um like it's a lot, and Critical
mm-hmm.
Role like is able to do it, I think, because they have a monstrous amount of resources,
mm,
um like built off the backs of like exploding onto the scene as like one of the first people who were doing this, coming from where they came from at Geek and Sundry. But like, yeah, it's much
Yeah,
more like doable, frankly, to make new things, and it's better in terms of channel logistics, like having enough energy to produce things, of course, and like the creative ends of it, but also just like bringing new people in, having a new thing to announce is exciting, and it'll reach new people, and that helps bring people into smaller channels like this.
well, yeah, because there's definitely like everyone has that when someone tells them about a new actual play or something like that. Oh, you gotta check this out. And when I tell someone I've watched Critical Role, they're like, "Oh, I'm not sure I want to get into that," and because that's a lot to catch up on, and that's no joke because like season one, like I looked at the hours, and I think I read somewhere it's like watching the entirety of Seinfeld twice.
Oh my
woo, yeah,
Like if you want to watch all of season one, like it is literally I think like watching all of Seinfeld like twice,
hmm,
something bonkers like that, and like that was nice about with Infinite Horizon is that you kind of have even on each episode you have a small recap of
hmm,
where everything is left off, that you're trying to bring people in, like you're still rehashing you're giving background still on what you're doing. You're not like, you don't understand what's going on. How dare you? Like, you're
Yeah.
not a true fan. Like, no, you have recaps, you have catch ups, and you're able to do all those things, but like you said, you still have to keep everyone understand. There it is.
I knew it. I knew it. I saw something. I sensed it. My cryptid senses were picking up on something.
I just. The worst part is that they told me they were gonna do it, and I didn't. I didn't believe them.
Off screen.
Sit in the chair in the back. It's fine.
Also, somebody did ask earlier, John, what did you do with Bree? I didn't do anything with Bree. Bree and everybody else that's over here for her birthday party are out in the kitchen playing Wingspan right now. I stepped away to come be a nerd for a while, rather than...
You stepped away from the bird game.
Yeah.
The tabletop bird game.
Yeah.
To come up my nerd cred up a little bit
There
more
you
by
go.
talking TTRPG.
Yeah. We were
A
playing...
bit to the point, sorry, to the long-term versus short-term. I have to say for myself, now that I've done something online long-term, and I'm very much used to not doing that, as someone who did theater quite a lot, packed a lot of hours of theater in a short amount of time in like all my high school years. That is not a long-term run. That is like, there's like 3 shows and a matinee on like the end of the weekend, and that's like 3 weeks, and then that's depending on the type of show it is. That's what I've been used to personally. And maybe that's not the case at all, but that's kind of a nice, sweet little way to do it. You have, your rehearsal time, tech week, the shows for 3 weeks, middle of the summer or whatever, middle of winter. And then you have your Q&A, and then you move on to the next project.
Yeah.
That's an interesting comparison, or an interesting comment too, because like I know I have heard the comparison of like small time live plays being compared to like a kind of community theater.
Yes.
And like when you think about the production timeline for like a play, for us like theater kids out here, it's like it's a few months of rehearsals leading up to it that gradually like kind of ramp up, and then there's like the 2 or 3 week stretch where you're just like go show 2 shows in a day, 1 day off, 2 more shows in a day, matinee done.
Mm-hmm.
And like it's not live play isn't structured quite like that. Most often it's like 1 session a week, but in a way it kind of is. It's not dissimilar, right? You have a couple of months of like meeting and production beforehand, and people like making their characters and doing the like necessary like world building and building the story out, and then like checking all these things, and like I'm just thinking about the exhaustion that I feel after doing a show, and even like doing a live play also, like you get done, it's like, oh, we're done, that was so much fun, but I'm so tired.
Yeah.
And with long running games, I think it is very, very easy to just you never really get a break from that exhaustion unless you very, very explicitly build that in, like build those breaks in.
Yeah. I'll say that there is exhaustion, but there's a difference between doing it live with a live audience and doing it with an audience that's on like all over the world, maybe perhaps, or in different parts of the country, because it could be very exhausting, yes, to have your role down and be like in it for however long the play is. But depending on the content or depending on your role, there is something that you're getting back from the audience that you don't quite get. So there's that feedback, and that's something that I've kind of missed a little bit, even though what comes with that is like some amount of like undue stress that I believe probably I put on myself a bit much, but there is an energy feedback that you're getting that you then are giving back, I think. That's what I would say about that.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Thank you for the feedback on my mic. As it turns out, Bree is a lot louder than I am, and I usually have my mic much closer to my face.
I also did turn you up a little bit on my end too, so
that's right.
Yeah.
You can just do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead, Hermes.
And also, when I started when Killian, who runs Rainbow and Razor Blades, had started talking about length of episode, or length of show, of not pushing to a 3 hour,
Mm-hmm.
and really getting used to doing more of a 2 hour game because it is more palatable for people watching, and also even kind of playing, especially when we've been playing with people that are, there's a couple people that we play with that have chronic illness, where it is much more palatable to have a 2 hour game or than it is a 3 hour plus, you know, slog. And I'm saying slog is it's not, it's a fun, enjoyable time, and it goes super quick. But I have found, even with the two-parter I did, like, if I'm pushing the story, and you kind of have to with a short two show run, you can crack out a lot in 2 hours. Like, if you're really moving stuff along and you're having a short series, I found that a 2 hour show has started working very well.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because like I know a lot of people who have gotten into, at least from the viewer side, watching actual plays and stuff like that, got into it during a time when I remember towards the end of like Geek and Sundry's run there, they were doing a lot of like edited actual plays, and I gotta say, one of the reasons it took me so long to start watching Dimension 20 is because I knew that they did some editing, but there's a key difference I think in the way that those things are edited. That those different shows, like I remember I tried to watch Relics and Rarities, and while I loved the players and the aesthetic of Relics and Rarities on Geek and Sundry, the thing that made it really hard for me to watch was the particular way that they edited it down, so that it was like they basically edited out the gameplay and just had the like RP stuff in it, and they'd like make references to like the roles and the checks that they were making and stuff like that, but in large measure they edited out the gameplay. And for me it made it really hard for me to stay engaged, not because I didn't not because I needed the gameplay in there, but because I could tell where there were gaps where things were changing and the continuity was hard to keep my brain focused on. Whereas like Dimension 20, I feel like the particular way that they do their editing, they edit out like very little of what they do. Like they've said it themselves. They do like jump cuts and that's about it, right? And those jump cuts are just camera cuts that they have going angles, all the different angles going simultaneously, and all they do with editing is just do the jump cutting between the camera angles that are all going for the whole run. So like that I think is something that has been a difference for me. But like I've heard people saying, you know, like the reason I bring this up is because you're talking about episode length, and I know that some people's solution to episode length of actual plays has been like, oh, editing, and I agree to a point, but I don't think it's editing down for length. I think it's editing down for engagement purposes, right? Because staring at the same screen for 3+ hours is hard to do, but that's one of the reasons why Dimension 20, I think their format is so much more watchable, even though they edit out very little of what they do. Um, it's because it's edited for watchability and not for length, and I think that makes it work really nicely.
Yeah, Dimension 20 makes a really, really good product. Like,
Yes, they
they,
do.
you know, when a couple of players are going off or like having a moment, then like camera cuts to them, or like when Brennan is doing a big cool bad guy thing or delivering like this tons of lore to like particular player who rolled well, then it's like just those two on the screen. Like that helps a lot. And of course, like they have their own fun gimmicks and stuff too, like the box of doom and like the little bits of like sound effects and music that they add. Like all of those little things I think come together to make it to make it like an experience that is like eminently watchable. Um,
Yeah, 'cause editing is a tool; it's not a solution,
Right. And I think Newly
so to
Human
speak.
down in chat actually made an excellent point that I think editing is a solution to pacing, not length. And if something is well paced, maybe
Yes.
length doesn't matter as much. And I absolutely agree with that. That has 100% been my experience when it comes to like edited actual plays, is that the ones that edit for length and content tend to be harder for me to actually like pay attention to and engage with, because we're jumping around and there's very obviously time jumps in between like the edits, and it's so hard to remain focused and engaged. But when it's edited for pacing purposes, yes, I absolutely agree that that is a huge boon.
Well, and when you mentioned relics and rarities, and you hit the nail on the head, because I couldn't figure out, because the minute you brought it up, I'm like, I just had a funky, like, I enjoyed it, but for the same thing, like, something was just, it wasn't, I don't, it wasn't the production. It was so cool. Like,
Yeah.
the people they had on were awesome, but I had that same thing where something just feels funky about this, and it's the production stuff. And you're right, it was probably the editing, and my brain didn't exactly pick it out. But the minute you mentioned it, I'm like, I wouldn't go. I'm it's not one of those shows I'll go back and watch. Like,
Yeah.
it's just not. Like, I will go back and watch oh shoot, it's just left my brain, with Vivka and Eric and B Dave, with Jason Charles Miller.
Oh, I know what you're talking about, but I cannot for the life of me remember the name of
Yeah,
it.
but I love that show. Like, I would go. I've went back and watched it. I've clipped it. I've done all the stuff for it. Um, and it's just and there are certain times that it's rough. Like, there are certain times, and that's okay. That doesn't stop people from watching it. But you're right with exactly what you mentioned, and some of that editing on there. Like, you can lose some people, and I think that what they really tried to do was make it more palatable for everybody to keep it going. And they're obviously successful, and that's great. But like you said, it just wasn't really my thing.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I think I don't take anything away from any of that, mainly because I know that, like, what GNS and Alpha were doing at the time was they were experimenting. They were experimenting with content, what they could do, what was working, what wasn't working. And so, like, I'm not passing any kind of value judgment on what they were doing. It's just simply that, like, that I think one of the things that I think people who have experimented with this thing have realized is that with an actual play, if you edit out the gameplay, you're sort of shooting yourself in the foot, because in large measure, what people like about actual plays is the fact that you're getting these, like, deep and complex narratives, but you're getting it from a tabletop RPG, and, like, that's one of the things that, like, is so compelling about it.
I think, and like, it was on an episode of Adventuring Party. I think that Brendan Lee Mulligan said this. He's like, people watch actual plays because they are a little bit messy and a little bit dirty, and, like, that's why we watch them. So I think if they're too clean, it ceases to be, like, as compelling of a medium, right?
Right.
Part of the feeling of a live play is a little bit the interplay between, this is a performance, but we are also playing a game.
Well, and, like, not to be crass, but, like, there's a great quote from Community, the show Community, where it's like, maybe if you polish a turd, you don't get a diamond, you just get a turd with less direction in life. And, like,
well said. Good line.
Yeah, it's a great line.
Yeah.
But
Also,
The answers we were looking for was Gax Pack from Gary Con.
that's what it was. Yes. Okay.
Also, the reason that I had to get up away was not because it was my turn in the bird game. I think they're still playing Wingspan out there, but I thought I heard the door opening, and so I turned and looked, and Ash had jumped out of her cat bed and was just pawing at the door, and then she looked over at me and gave me the most mournful look that I have ever seen on a cat's face in my entire life. Like, it's closed.
Lies. Deceit. Don't trust him. Don't trust it.
It's closed. And so I went.
I think Geekouts makes a good point here, which is I don't want too much gameplay, just enough to know it's a game, but don't spend 15 minutes on rules. Game mechanics is not why I watch. And I think that's probably fair. I think that's fair. If you're spending, like, even if it's not a streamed game, I start to get anxious as a GM when we're spending too much time on figuring out what the actual rule is. And even in I don't know that I'd pay so much attention to this in a streamed game, but in a home game, in, like, an offline game, the only time that I spend that much time on a rule without just, like, making a call is when it's, like, going to impact the drama of the moment, when the specific way that things go down has an impact on the drama of the moment. If it's just sort of like your average, like, it's just a moment in the game, any moment, then I'll just sort of like make a call and say, we'll look it up later, but here's what we're gonna do, you know. But I think I agree with the general sort of spirit of what Geek Outs is saying, is that like I like the idea of the thing being a game, but I also don't necessarily want to watch people argue about rules. But I also, but it is also my opinion. It is also my opinion that it's something that Matt Colville has said, and since he said it, I thought about it, and I'm like, you know what? I think I agree with that. Is that if you are arguing about the rules, if you're arguing about what to do, you're playing D&D or TTRPGs, right? If you're arguing about what to do, then you're playing the game. If you're arguing about the rules, then you are not playing the game, and you are in fact just having an argument.
Yeah.
So yeah.
The former is fun to watch. The latter less.
Yeah.
Much less so.
Yeah.
Right.
I forgot, Matt, that was a counter that we had here, and
I mean,
there it is.
I was waiting for it.
Look at that.
Yeah.
Only 7 times though. I don't believe it.
I
Wow.
think
that's
that
7
There's the
times
evidence.
since
I
we
feel
made
like
it.
I feel like these counters. No, I don't know about that. I feel like these counters refresh after a little while because, like, I don't know.
I
Seven
feel
is
like that counter has been run up higher than 7.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, me too. That's only like, what is that? Like how many Horcruxes Voldemort has? Like that doesn't seem right.
Which this is my favorite game to play is how many hells? Is it Game of Thrones or Dungeons and Dragons?
Yep.
And it's 7 hells in Game of Thrones and 9 hells in D&D. I did it, right?
Yes.
Okay,
Sure.
Good.
I honestly don't know about Game of Thrones, but yeah.
Yeah. Oh, people in Game of Thrones are constantly going 7 hells, and you're like, okay.
Oh,
cool.
yeah, I kind of put the show out of my mind.
Me too.
Yeah.
It's probably best that way. Anyway.
One of my old roommates was like, "Oh yeah, we're watching whatever the dragon, something of the dragon, the new episode,
House of Dragons,
the new
I think it is.
House of Dragons."
Yeah.
There we go, got it. And my response was pretty much like, "I'm happy for you."
Oh my gosh, we have an Allison in chat. Hi, Allison.
I'm not gonna be
Hello.
hurt. Allison, hi. I'm watching from the train. Hell yeah.
That's cool.
Are the
Also,
7
hi,
hells...
Cam.
Lots of folks cruising in.
Yeah.
Are the 7 hells the 7 seasons? I wish it was that interesting. I don't actually know, and I don't know anything.
I wish there were
about
only
this.
7 seasons.
I don't know anything about the 7 hells that are part of the lore of George R. R. Martin's setting.
That's the thing.
Actually,
That's not like, this is sort of getting off topic, but like not to dunk on Game of Thrones, but also absolutely for that reason. Like George R. R. Martin's world is one where like he gives you so much lore, but never the lore that you actually care about. Never the lore that's like actually interesting.
Right.
oh man, I could just go read a textbook about the War of Roses.
Genuinely, some sections of those books read to me the same way that, like, was it Numbers in the Bible? Whichever one is like so and so begat so and so begat so and so. I was just like,
Yep.
I am already asleep.
I am very much
That was the funny thing is I remember like people like talking about the Game of Thrones books, and so like I like picked up like the first one, watched them, I read it, like, oh, this is, I can see it. Okay, cool.
Mm-hmm.
Then I got to the second one, and then I started, by the second one you start poking around to see how pissed you're going to be, at how behind you are, how many there is. It's like thankfully, like I started the Dresden Files later in the game, so like I had a couple to do when he was writing the rest.
right.
But then I get this, and there's like, how many? Like, what do you mean there's not another one? Like, and I just kind of stopped writing them. I'm like, fuck this. And I literally stopped reading the one like through like halfway through like the second book or something like that. No.
Yeah.
I'm not going through this. I'm not going through it.
I made this comment. I don't remember if it was last week or the week before. I think it was the week before. But like, there's a meme that my friend made me aware of that like that George R. R. Martin, Patrick Rothfuss, and Brandon Sanderson have a mutual pact that they will shave only when they release a book. And it's very funny because Brandon Sanderson perpetually clean shaven, and that man can crank out books. It's great. But But yeah, so okay, so we've talked a lot about like actual plays and stuff like that, but like I want to kind of focus more in on the TTRPG side of this because I'm interested because you're also pretty new to TTRPGs in general, aren't you, Steve?
Yeah, the like when I was in back in the 90s when I started playing second edition. No, I'd gotten the books for second edition, but again, I had like one or two friends to actually play it with, so it's mostly just reading it and wanting to play it.
Yes,
Um,
I
my buddy,
100%
yep,
remember that
yep,
experience.
yep, yep. And can we play this with two of us? Not really, but look how cool these books are. You want to buy some more stuff for it? Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. And then the same buddy and I, we played Rifts. Was that Palladium Games? I think they still sell the same exact books at conventions, the same exact books. Not coming out a lot of new content there. But yeah, and then that was it. And then like just within, then I got really into board games. Um, like probably about 7 years ago now. Like, and then got into them to the point where I'm, volunteering for Red Raven at Gen Con, like playtesting stuff, like for them, like doing that much of it, and then I'm gonna explain something, and I don't mean to be crass about it, but when you're volunteering for board game companies, like you are a literal cog in a wheel, and you are a number. It is not.
Yeah.
It is not my favorite process. Like Red Raven as a company they are the best company. They use a different company to do their demos at cons, and that one is like the McDonald's of demos. They do the same for
Yep.
everybody, and they're just too big, and they're running too much stuff, and
Yeah.
it's just not the people were fun, and demoing the games was fun, but the minutia that involved with the rest of it wasn't for me. And then I'm watching Critical Role and stuff like that, and I'm like, I just want to play. And so I literally got some fifth edition stuff, and like for my birthday, I told my friends, and they're like, "Well, what do you want to do?" I'm like, "I want to play D&D," and they're like, "Okay." And I'm like, so I started printing some minis, and I got, I like it's like literally like build a set. Like I started printing minis, and like I decided to write some stuff, made some characters, and we sat down and played for 3 and 4 hours. And everyone's like, "This is really fun." I'm like, "Yes, this is fun." And so then like, we did that one or two times, and then I'm like, I guess I'll try that campaign, and got on the Streampunks Discord server, which I had been on and been watching, and they're like, "You gonna be okay to run it?" And I'm like, "I've watched several seasons of Seinfeld worth of D&D content." I think I'll be like you're inhaling over like 300 hours of
Yeah.
just watching DMF 5e rules. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's the same like with Cipher rules and everything, like watching everyone run it so much. That's how I learned them, and I know a lot of rules now.
Yeah.
And so learning that and starting to play them has been a great experience. It's been a lot of fun, and it's you don't have to buy more board games. Like like you can, it has a lot more replay value than some of the board games that I own.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
100%. 100%.
Yeah. Oh, I think that is one of the other like interesting like kind of unique opportunities that live plays afford is that as a hobby, like tabletop RPGs are social, right? Because you have to do them with a small group of people. But then like you're not really spending a lot of time going to your friends' houses and watching them play D&D, so like you don't really pick up on like all of the other like little house rules or rules that you might not see because somebody's playing a different character archetype or because a GM is using a different set of like rules that you overlooked or optional rules in whatever manual. And so like live plays I think do offer like a lot in terms of helping people get into running and playing in games because
Yeah.
it does make like you can watch people play the game and you can pick up a fair bit from watching a bunch of people who usually are pretty good at playing tabletop RPGs in some form or another do it. And that is,
Yeah.
I remember back when we had Sam Belev on here, they talked about playing tabletop games as a skill that you could be good at.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And like that's honestly what this makes me think of. Like I think it helps people. Like somebody used the command. Live plays can serve as a scaffold for people who want to learn how to play or who want to learn how to run tabletop RPGs. Yes, I used a teacher word.
Yeah, no, it absolutely is that, because I find that hey, my turn to run up the counter. Like Matt Colville talks about the rules of a game being like the language, like a language to start help. It's not the game itself; it's language, and just like language, right? Like when you're learning a language, you know one, and the next language that you learn is sort of has a certain level of difficulty to learn. But then once you learn that language, it becomes exponentially easier to learn more languages, with each language that you learn, right? It's because it's physically altering the way that your brain is processing this thing. And I think that's probably true of tabletop RPGs. And it's another way that it's like a language that, you parse one and you have learned that. And it's a little bit of a struggle, but you get there. The next one that you learn is also a little bit of a struggle because it's a departure from what you already know. But after that, it's just you just start picking them up. And I think that is a little bit how this kind of
Yeah, it is.
goes.
That has a really interesting way to think about it too. And like the English major is definitely like coming out in me here in this part of the discussion. But yeah, like it's when we talk about like memes or something like that, when you learn like the kind of memes that a certain group of people use, you're learning the language to communicate with those people. And so like when we watch live plays, we're learning the language to both talk about and participate in the activity, like the activity that's part of the content we're consuming, which I think is really cool. And
Yeah.
then just like if you learn a romance language or if you learn fucking Latin for some reason, like you'll all of a sudden look at a whole bunch of different, like every language that you get afterwards that you try to pick up afterwards that has similar roots, it gets easier, right? And the same is true of games.
Yeah, and it's similar like with board games of once you learn how to learn board games and you have a group of friends that all know how to learn board games, well, is this a pick up and deliver? Is this a worker placement? Is this a set collection? Is this a resource management? Okay, it's a resource management. And this is now I'm going to have to look at what I'm, and I know what to look for. When I pick up a new TTRPG, I generally go to character creation.
Mm-hmm.
Like I tend to look there first, and I
Yep.
look at the stats. How many stats are there? Are there abilities? Like flip to the magic. Is there magic? Do I go to that section? Are we looking at actions here? Like how many? Is it a D20 system? Is it a D6? Is it Is it what kind of system is it? Who did they gank the rules from? Okay, they didn't. Is this even going to work? I mean,
I
I mean
love you.
because
I
yeah.
love you, indie game devs. With all my heart. That sentence ends there.
Hmm.
I
and
don't play
and
test my games either.
well, and it's one of those things like we on Rainbows and Razor Blades we played Trials of Bren for play testing, and we played it on stream, and it was great. Like there wasn't a lot of healing involved, so it got kind of vicious. He literally like the DM had to like throw the game master had to like literally like throw health packs at us because we were rolling bad, and there was just not a way to come back from that.
Yeah.
Um, but he was super open to, and he'd been working on this for a while, and was really invested in the playtesting and the art, and it's a phenomenal game. Like I really really enjoyed it, and looking through the trans rights for Texas, the 400 and as I talk about the 430 different separate items on that thing,
Mm-hmm.
there's so much stuff in there, and
Yeah.
there's a lot of really really neat things in there, but after you've read a whole bunch of them, you can start picking out, like things will work well on stream, things that will work well for this group of friends, things that I would not play with this, with these like who's going to be interested in this, and it just goes back to the same thing of definitely looking at my board game shelf. I'm going to go to this friend's. Okay, I'm not grabbing Everdale. Okay, but I can grab like Dice City. I can grab as I'm staring at my shelf. I can grab Barren Park. I can grab Kami-sama or something like that. Like I can or Karuba. Karuba is another one that's really easy to do. Um, I can grab one of those because you only grab the wrong game one or two times before you really, really rethink it. Because I brought something over to play with someone that hadn't played it before, and there was a lot of just dead stare. Like came to turn, we're like like 4 or 5 rounds in, and get to this person's turn, and there's still that dead look in their eye. You're like, I fucked up.
Yeah.
No, actually, I have a question. I have a question because that made me think about something. This was a question that we asked, kind of as part of a couple conversations we've had with other streamers and stuff, as it regards video games and what makes a good video game to stream, right? Where we talked about like Monster Prompt, super fun video game to play with your friends. As it regards streaming it, like it really depends on your audience, but a lot of that game is reading funny things, and like I have personally found like trying to stream a game like that is difficult. It's also a marathon trying to like read all of the voices, and then it goes really slow.
Yeah.
So or versus like what's the finding the balance of like this is fun for me to play and also engaging to watch, and even potentially with something like Cult of the Lamb where there are extensions or plugins where like your Twitch chat can directly engage with the game. So like what makes a good, in terms of like looking at a tabletop RPG system, and I don't know the answer to this question, that's why I like it. What makes a good tabletop RPG to stream?
When I have found running the indie round table, it's got to be something, because I have definitely passed on something where I don't think I can explain the rules or you'll be able to understand the rules within, like Lucas said, like like maybe when you're discussing rules or arguing about rules in like 10-12 minutes or something like that. um like Deep Nightly Fathoms, it's a darker game, but there's only, I think, like 3 or 4 attributes and like 3 or 4 saving throws. One's D6, attributes are a D6, and saving throws are a D20. That's it. Like you're doing that like as the GM. I'm keeping track of your HP. It's kind of a hidden thing because it's used for rerolls, and it's called perturbance, which is how mad the Kingdom of Night is getting at you for sticking your nose into it. GM keeps track of that too. So really, you just have to, what are you going to do in Dreamland? And then I'm going to tell you, what stats you're going to roll, and then your saving throw. And for a stream, like, I have a character sheet, and I know where you're at, like, and your abilities are based on what fathom or level you're in. So honestly, you don't even need to have a character sheet up because I know where we're at. I can just tell you, and you only have like one effect which helps change your roll. So I pretty much tell you what to roll too, so you're just playing in the sandbox at that point. So
Yeah.
The other one that we're gonna do, the Space Train Space Heist one, it's like Monster of the Week where you have a roll. So you have your roll, like you have your one sheet that tells you all your stuff that your person can do, and then you're going to use that specific shovel in our bigger sandbox, and you're literally on rail as you're trying to go up this, from what I understand, go through this train car to get to your destination. The game is literally on rails. So you're going to be through that, so you don't have to, well, I want them to go in this direction. Well, we went left. I suddenly moved the goal to the left now. No matter what road you took out of town, you are going towards your destination. Congratulations.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. This question is interesting to me because like I think about this a lot. Obviously, like I sort of have to, and I think my answer now, I also don't know if I have a solid answer, but answer now, I think, is very different than my answer when I first started out. Because when we first started out, my first thought was, well, obviously it needs to be something that it's not particularly crunchy, right? Like, it's a system that can't be particularly crunchy. It can't have a whole lot of complex or unfamiliar rules, because then you, like, people, like, one, the players are going to have a hard time with it. They're going to struggle with it. And two, the audience is going to have a hard time following what's going on. But I'm not, as we've done this more and more, I've become less and less convinced that that is true. I think you can, because, like, Cyberpunk Red is a pretty crunchy system. It's not a complicated system, but it's a crunchy system.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that worked out perfectly fine. And I think it's funny that Geek Out said this in the chat, because it actually sort of aligns sort of with what I was thinking along these lines. Geek Out says, in my opinion, the system has to spark the imagination of both the players and the audience. Like, when the audience wants to play in a setting or learn the system, you've done your job. And I think if there's one thing that I can say about Cyberpunk Red, it's that setting is fascinating. It is, like, a deeply, like, engaging system, because it is on one level so familiar to, like, our real life, but also extremely unfamiliar in a lot of really intriguing ways. And having that juxtaposition makes it a fascinating system. And the fact that it is extremely crunchy, the fact that a lot of your attacks are based on distance charts, really doesn't factor into it at all.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah.
And, like, the end result of, like, the design in Cyberpunk Red is, because I think the selling point for Cyberpunk Red, if I was going to try and pitch that to the game to somebody in the same way that I try to, like, explain, I don't know, Terminus in a sentence or two, is you are in the not so distant future. Technology has advanced to the point where it is integrated into our everyday surroundings and our bodies. You live a gritty, violent life that is and, like, corporations and corruption are everywhere, and that's cyberpunk. Like, you can boil it down to that, and the mechanics support that. Like, you have all those range charts and, like, the armor calculations and health and all of that stuff, because it's real easy to die when someone shoots a regular ass person with a bullet.
Write that down.
Yeah. What's it?
Getting a tattoo.
Yeah, I'm gonna put that on a T-shirt. There's a quote actually from an anime that's "People die when they are killed."
That's a similar quote from Community, which is "Bullets just kind of kill you." Like,
bullets just kind of kill you.
And, like, a lot of the other things that are part of the mechanics of Cyberpunk, crunchy as they are, enforce that fantasy. And so when you start talking about, like, okay, I'm trying to fire a gun at somebody in a crowded street that's 50 meters away, that's really hard to do.
Mm-hmm.
Or if I'm you know, the other things are like, oh, I'm integrating a piece of technology into my fleshy body that has an effect on me. Sure, it gives me functionally superpowers, but that also messes with me, the person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and so when you start getting into the crunch of those rules, it all makes sense. It is accessible. I think it's within the fantasy.
I think. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
That definitely makes a lot of sense. And also, just like when Freeman was talking about, you know, like community theater and stuff like that, the show you were providing doesn't have to actually show the audience all the wires and the lights and the prep that came beforehand. Like when you're looking at Thunder and Blood and everything like that, the game moves really well, but it doesn't mean that the audience is seeing every single thing that took place in the background to make the magic happen. Like, you're explaining, yes, this is a crunchy system. You're giving the wherewithal where this is how this all works, but we're really, like that Geek Out said, is that you're moving the story forward and you're engaged with those characters and those stories. The system is helping you tell that story and move that story along in a way that's fair for all at the table. You're following all the same rules to make the story work.
Well, it's fascinating because, like, here, like, as you said that, I think I very much agree with you, because I think it's very similar to something that I've said about game styles, right? Henry and I actually were just having this conversation just a few weeks ago, and what I realized is that, like, a lot of things that people dislike about certain aspects of really crunchy systems, right? Like the classic one is tracking rations, right? That seems like a really tedious bit of bookkeeping that just seems like it would be run so counter to anything even remotely entertaining because it's not even fun for the players. However, I kind of come down on the other side of this. I am never going to say anything like concrete about whether something is fun or not, because my answer to that is always going to be it's going to depend on the fiction that you are trying to convey in your game. If your D&D game is like your classic heroic fantasy where, you know, the goal is to stop the bad guys, save the world, and be heroes and whatever, then yeah, you probably don't want to be tracking rations and worrying about getting lost in the wilderness and that kind of stuff. But if your D&D game, as like our Chult campaign is, very much about survival and about like the dangerous environment and trying to sort of have that juxtaposition between very minimal civilization and super dangerous jungle and wilderness, then tracking rations sometimes suddenly becomes an entirely different thing, because you're not just tracking minutia for the sake of tracking minutia. You are now that is a matter of life and death, and it serves the drama of the game that you are doing. And I think that's a little bit kind of what we're getting at here. And I sort of suspect that it's probably the same answer for what makes a streamed game, a TTRPG good for streaming, is does the game serve the drama of the story that you were trying to tell?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because when I mentioned Trials of Bren earlier, that the GM is one of the individuals that he likes. He has weight involved in equipment. Mm-hmm. He said, this is one of my things. This is something that I find interesting and important. So it's in the game. Like, each one has a weight, and you have to really pay attention to that because it matters. You're literally carrying all your stuff. It's not the stereotypical D&D player who has a bag of holding entire town he just left inside it, you know. Because like you said, like rations, when you're playing the high fantasy one, you're like, I have a bag of holding now, and I just poured the entire general store into my bag, and I can make fanciful food, and there's a spell that creates food and water. Like, I mean, and so, but yeah, and so that is not going to draw drama into your game. You know, correctly balancing fights and battles may be able to do that, or if you're having mysteries or puzzles. But you know, but yeah, I think I would definitely. I have not played in a game that had, you know, that thin of a wire, where, you know, between starving and what that does to you, and exhaustion and all of that. But yeah, that's something that I think would be very interesting.
Yeah. Well, and even in our Chult game, I usually just do it as like well, actually that's not true. Allison tracks the rations, but that's because she enjoys doing that kind of thing. But so I allowed her to do it just because. But like originally, my thought was like, you don't need like a hard and fast, like, you don't need to like mark down every day's worth of rations. You just need to make sure that you've got because you just need to make sure that you've got enough to get there and back if that's the goal, right? Because the thing that I cared about was the fiction of making a plan. I wanted them to like engage in the fiction of planning their expeditions into the wilderness, because that to me is an engaging and fun survival gameplay experience. The idea of like, okay, well, we gotta get food. We gotta make sure we have enough food. And in order to make sure we have enough food, we gotta make sure we have the money to get that food. And so in order to get that money, we gotta like do all these like quests and things and engage in the world. And all of it serves to just create more engagement in the world and the setting. And that, I think, matters. I mean, the reason Henry and I were talking about this actually was we were talking about video games originally, and we were talking about inventory management. In Mass Effect 1, it has been well documented here on the internet that I hate inventory management in that game. I, like, more often than not will not even like change my loadout because I just don't want to deal with it, because that's not what that game is about. Mass Effect 2 figured this out and largely did away with that, or at least streamlined it in a way that was more aligned with what the game was doing, right? But there are some games where I'm like, ooh, I just love getting that, like, ooh, I'm just exploring the wilderness and I found this cool sword that does a little bit more damage than the one that I have. Ooh, I like that. Give me that. I want to make my numbers a little bit bigger. And I want to, like, oh, I want to make sure that this party member has the right equipment for them. And, like, ooh, that's really good. And then I'm going to have that for me. And, like, I get really into that. I suddenly get really into inventory management because it matters and it makes, like, it serves the game as a whole. But I'm, like, as using again Mass Effect 1 as an example, it serves no purpose but to frustrate me.
Yep. Well, I had to go look it up because I had to remember the game. But Forbidden Lands, I remember Streampunk playing on Q Times, and it's wonderful because you have D8 rations or D10 rations, and only if you roll a certain number do you then go down to D6. And
that's
then
very cool.
And so your D4 rations, like you could be at D6, but if you don't roll, I think it's like a 1 or something like that, those may last forever. It shows how long you're able to keep them stretched out. But then something happens from there. So there's more risk involved than just ticking it off one day. Like you could totally 2 days in a row, now you're almost out, and then you have to completely change your game plan on how you're going to fix that now immediate problem. When in like D&D or something, you one check mark gone. Okay, I have 8 more check marks. I have to figure this out. But something else can happen in the lieu of like as far as I know, there's not a monster that goes after your rations. Like there's not like ration monster that's going to suddenly change this gameplay, and I suddenly now have to go hunting.
Right.
Wait, that's
right.
me. I'm the ration monster. I'll take the ration.
No, that's you in real life, Freeman. That's you in real life.
I am there. I am 100% there. I am the snack monster of this house.
But yeah, like I think sort of that's a little bit what we're coming around to is the realization that I think there might not be a like answer or like hard and fast guideline to figuring out what TTRPGs are best for streaming. I think it really does just sort of depend on the story that you're trying to tell on your on the stream. Like, what is the fiction that you are trying to accomplish, and then finding what is the like. We're sort of facing that down right now with because one of the things we've talked about in the past, and continue this conversation, as we mentioned, like Tomorrow is Dead and that universe being sort of more of like kind of becoming an anthology kind of thing, right? Where we have different short games in that same world and sort of continue to build out the fiction of that world. And that might include a different cast of players and characters, but it also might include a different rotating games, like game systems that we use. And like Tomorrow is Dead, we decided to use kids on bikes because it was a very specific idea that we had. The idea being some kids go away for you know like a camping trip and come back to the apocalypse, right? And like to me, kids on bikes was the one that like exemplified everything about the story we were trying to tell. And like no other game was going to do that story the way that we wanted to do it. But kids on bikes isn't necessarily going to be useful for a game where, for example, survivors have to like found a colony and like make a place to survive in this new world, right? That's not a game. I think that trying to use kids on bikes or a similar system for a game like that would just serve to frustrate. It just wouldn't work as well, and you'd end up with more problems than anything like really tangibly good. So yeah.
I think that was definitely because I think, like you said, kids on bikes worked really well for that because it was literally there was no superpowers involved. There was no exceptional strength. It was the kids on bikes of you're just some kids trying to figure it out through luck, your wits, and working together, and that's what you got. Like you're not gonna have a bunch of 13-year-olds that suddenly find a cache of weapons and then go kicking down doors. That's not
Right.
That's not what. And then suddenly I am the chosen one and have super magic powers, and like it's just not the aesthetic you were going for, and another system wouldn't have supported that. Wouldn't have
No,
supported
definitely not.
the direction you were looking to go for there.
Mm-hmm. Newly Human says, I'm planning on my first ever venture as GM for my group and I've decided to give them horror. The journey to find the perfect system for the story I want to tell was not an easy one. I'm curious, what did you land on, and what sort of, I mean, you don't have to like lay out.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't have to lay out your plot points, but I'm just really curious about like what kind of story you were trying to tell. But yeah,
and we're not going to do it. Yeah, we're not going to do anything until you answer. So it's just
we're just gonna sit here in dead silence. No, but
Freeman's even gonna take a seat like at the back there. Like...
yeah,
Freeman's just like,
nope,
I'm waiting.
We said it.
The I receive, you receive meme, like.
Yeah, but like I remember when we were talking about Tomorrow is Dead, and we tossed around the idea of Outbreak Undead as a system that we could use, and I kind of quickly dismissed that, not because I don't like the system. I don't know the system well enough to know whether I need to dismiss it or not based on liking. But one thing I knew about Outbreak Undead is that it was definitely not we were not making a story about gritty survivalists in the wilderness, right? It was a story that was really just kind of a coming of age story. I mean, that whole story was like Tomorrow is Dead was basically just a metaphor for coming of age. Like if you really think about it, that whole story was basically like teens dealing with their own anxieties, traumas, and all that sort of stuff. And that story told through the mirror of a zombie apocalypse, and that's basically what that was. And I'm sorry, like I'm sure Outbreak Undead is a great system, but I don't think it could have told that story. So,
no. Well, like because at the end of the day, Tomorrow is Dead is really just the zombie apocalypse. In that the apocalyptic elements of Tomorrow is Dead really just serve to intensify the feeling that a lot of people feel when they are graduating high school and moving away from all of their friends and going to do an entirely different thing and learn how to be a different person somewhere else.
Yeah.
In a way that is entirely new, like that seems entirely new to them. Like it feels like the end of the world.
Yeah.
In some ways. And so, like
100%.
It's navigating all of those feelings, but in the middle of a zombie apocalypse instead of at an 8 a.m. music theory class.
Two very comparable events, I think. Newly Human says, I think it's got to be Call of Cthulhu because I've got this idea of fading memory that I think will mesh well with Sanity Mechanic. That sounds awesome. I hope that goes really well for you because that sounds super cool.
I hadn't heard of Outbreak Undead until Jake played it on City of Dead, and like after that rung a bell when I then went and looked at it, because that was exactly like you had mentioned, like colony building, like different stats, that kind of thing, and it worked perfect for what they were going for. Because it was funny, it was because it was done at a similar time, and it was night and it was, and the randomness of it, but also made it perfect because it was night and day. The drama was 100% different because in Tomorrow is Dead, you had those flashbacks of literally in school, and that bled over into the literal problems you were having. Like they were still upset with Casey about what took place, and the character not signing up for for certain clubs because Casey needs help with this, and that realistically stuff like that bleeds over into your into life and into the struggles that you're going through at that time. And so that those small things really end up mattering in a game like Kids on Bikes, that where Outbreak Undead, you would have, your next player character would have smacked you in the face for bringing, what are you talking about? We're about to die. We're trying to get medicine and stuff. What are you doing? You're talking about your D&D club. Get the hell out of here. Like, and so those, but, and so that's what made both of those series were some of my favorites. But and it was the system that you used that helped make those differences.
Absolutely. And like I think one of the things that helps, like I have to wonder sometimes like how much of the game system informing how the game plays out, how much of that is the game design and how much of it is purely psychological, right? Like, oh, I know that this game is Kids on Bikes, so therefore I will be playing a head empty teenager who is like should be focusing on surviving but is instead focused on teen drama, right? Like how much of it is design and how much of it is psychological?
Have we all seen that that little clip of some makeup video or another that's like if the church, or like if the men find out we can shapeshift, they'll tell the church.
Yes.
And it's the middle of it's in the middle of somebody doing their makeup as
Right.
a makeup tutorial, and like I'm sitting here as like the game dev in the room being like, they're onto it.
Right,
Because like what I you know. Matthew Grivelin has said this a few times about Mall Kids on and off stream, but he's like, I don't know that anyone has told me about their game of Mall Kids has ever played Mall Kids correctly, and that is totally fine. Because like the pitch for Mall Kids is you are a bunch of teenagers working in a mall, and you're getting up to stupid shit that teenagers do when they work in a mall. And whether or not you are abiding exactly by the mechanics as Matthew Gravelin wrote them in that 24 page zine is irrelevant. Matthew created that one right there. Matthew created a framework for you. There's an x-axis and a y-axis. Teen, mall, corp, cred. You fit somewhere in here, and a significant amount of that just comes from the people who are playing the game. And that's kind of the secret of game dev, I think, is I'm going to make a thing that gives you the axes for a play experience, and I'm going to take just like a fistful of darts, and I'm going to throw them. And they're going to land, and I'm going to label like 3/4 of them, and then I'm going to put a few letters next to the other ones, and be like, I don't know what that means. You find out. And then you just kind of go from there. And I think there really is, as somebody who writes games, there is something to that.
Like obviously certain, like what we were talking about with Cyberpunk Red, like obviously the mechanics do inform the way that you play that game. They absolutely do. They must. But somehow I suspect with a game like, I don't know. I don't think there's anything inherently in the mechanics of Kids on Bikes that's like that says you are a child, right? Like hell, there's even rules in there for playing adult characters, right? Like I don't think there's anything inherently in those rules that specifically necessitates playing a teenager or a child or whatever, right? But I think a lot of it is psychologically, you know what game you're playing and what characters you need to make, you know.
And there is
I think it references in there like, adults don't understand or something like that. I haven't. It's been a long time since I've looked at it. And so but what I will say is that's why I like when anyone asks, like, I want to tell this story, I will like Cypher can probably do it just because of the difficulty that you can just assign to anything, like going up the stairs, difficulty 1, like the stairs are on fire, like difficulty 5. Like, I mean, and so but that simple aspect is that you can look at almost any situation and assign a difficulty number to it, and then it comes back to the discussion of which of my skills applies then the bargaining comes in of the Caitlin flying the ship and then just reading off every single skill and saying, please let this work.
Involving sight.
Yeah. Task involving sight. Mechanics.
Yeah.
And so I will always say is they have a big catch-all in the Cypher system of being able to do that. But now with some of their new campaigns that came out, they are starting to, now they're directing more, okay, this is fantasy, this is Western, this is the old gods of Appalachia. Like they're fine-tuning that they're fine-tuning that knife to then stab into just every specific genre to make it more again, I'm going to say specific about 17 more times. Please put up a counter.
I hear I honestly am really glad about that, because I think I used to be really, really interested, like me a few years ago was really into the idea of a setting agnostic system, like a system divorced from a specific setting, and I liked that concept because then I was like, I could do whatever I want with this. But more and more, like the further and further I've gone into TTRPGs, the more and more I've found the value in a system that knows what it's trying to do, sets out to do that one thing, and then does that one thing. I think that there's huge value in that. And like as much as like don't get me wrong, there's a place for like for generic systems that like are not tied to a setting. There's a huge I love them. I do love them. There's some cuz sometimes I just want a blank canvas and I want to go nuts, you know? Like sometimes that's what I want. But sometimes I've grown to really appreciate a game system that knows exactly what it is and then does that one thing and doesn't try to be anything else, because more often than not you end up with a tighter game that way. You end up with something with more to like bite into, because then you are existing, you're told you exist between here and here. And now you can just be there and you don't have to go, okay, you exist somewhere and you and your group get to put up your boundaries, the boundaries within which you exist. And I find you end up with a much muddier game that way, where kind of anything goes, which, don't get me wrong, that can be really fun. And I have had lots of fun with that kind of thing. But it sometimes is very beneficial to know, like one of the things that I'm seeing right now, just to use a concrete example, making my character for the Star Trek Adventures game that I'm going to be in, having the bounds of like I am a Starfleet officer has been really interesting, because now if anybody knows anything about me as a player, they know I like to play against type. So I'm like, I'm a Starfleet officer. Now this is what a Starfleet officer looks like, and now I can determine where I am on that spectrum or where I am opposed to that spectrum. And I think that makes it so much easier for me to know what my character is, because I know what is expected. You know? And that
like,
doesn't mean I have to do what's expected. It just means that I now have I have a temperature gauge for what is expected, and I can do whatever I want with that.
It's just Bones. That's the only
Yeah.
character you can play. It's just Bones. That's
Just
it.
Bones, yeah.
That's it.
Damn it, Jim! I'm a TTRPG player, not a doctor.
Doubling back to your comment earlier about like there's nothing specific about, you know, if you remove if you put tape over the title of the game, like there's nothing that says you have to play kids, right? About the mechanics of that game. Not really, but the way that the game's mechanics works prompt certain like thematic content, and that builds those boundaries. So while you might not necessarily be like, yes, I'm this exact kind of teenager, when you look at just the mechanics, if you extract them from, you know, the story or like the game design, the intent there that they've provided to say this is the kind of game you are playing, you'll get those themes that are emergent in like young adult literature and like coming of age stories, because that's just kind of, those are the prompts that you have to interact with the other character, the way that the ways that your character has to interact with the game, the world of the game. And so while you might not necessarily like wind up with that, you do kind of still exist within those bounds that you described. And I don't know, it's game design's cool. It's a lot of fun. Building those fences and saying like hop these at your leisure is very fun.
Yes, absolutely. So needless to say, I am not playing an exemplary Starfleet officer. That will be, I'm excited.
Well, but that's honestly, that makes a group. You know, if everyone is like, should we follow all the rules? Yes, zero adventure. So
Yeah.
like when I think back to again, the Streampunks Star Trek, not their current one, but the one before, when they had Revati Damasay on it. She played a very, you know, didn't get along with people, like was extremely smart, but was extremely like not about the chain of command. And that was like, but was super extremely an amazing science officer, and so their intelligence got their mouth out of trouble. I mean, and that makes an endearing character when you have those faults, but they're still good at their job, so you can't be that really mad at them, but they're kind of endearing also because they're kind of funny in that sarcastic kind of dickish way, and
Yeah.
that makes that makes an endearing friend at times, and that makes an endearing character, like someone that is dependable but is just a little bit rough.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. No. So it's interesting. Like I think that, and I do really like that, and I like the idea that there is a standard to which, if you so choose, you can be diametrically opposed. And like like you were mentioning, John, about like the prompts that the game gives you to interact with, it's great because, sort of pairing that with what Steve was just saying, right? You have a way of creating drama and tension when you know the the expected thing. You know what realm you are playing in, right? To keep using the example of Star Trek, right? You know what the exemplary like officer looks like, the very follow the rules, whatever. And then if you make a character that, is that but to the left, or like is that but or is not that at all, that's how you get tension, you get drama, and you get interesting stuff happening. And that's a harder thing to accomplish with a game system that says the world is your oyster, go nuts, right? Like it's a harder thing to accomplish with that.
Yeah, because you have to decide
What the standard is
where.
and where you deviate from it.
Yes, and that's a difficult feat of world building to do,
Yes.
is to not only build a character, to build a character and the system that they exist within, right? And I don't mean system as in game system, of a character and the world, the context. That's the word that I'm looking for, the context that they exist in.
Yeah.
Whereas something like teens in space, kids on bikes, mall kids, Alice is missing. I can just keep naming, like listing these off, and like each of these, just off of the title, you've already got like kind of a vibe for, these are the boundaries that I exist
Mhm.
in. This is the kind of game that I'm sitting down to play. And so I can play against type. I can play an adult in kids on bikes if I want to, and that's an interesting experience, especially if I'm playing with a bunch of like 14-year-olds. Or like I can play the 18-year-old that's everybody's babysitter, or like there's so
You
many
mean
ways.
Steve Harrington?
Yes, you could perfectly recreate the events of kids on bikes, of Stranger Things in Kids on Bikes if you wanted to.
Yep.
Yeah, because again, that outlier of someone that's older, and even in the later seasons of Stranger Things, when the most popular basketball player is just still in town and is still hanging out with the geeky science kid, and that
Yep.
relationship is what makes it. And
Mhm.
Bob at Radio Shack is
Yep.
still one of my all-time favorite characters, and he was just this guy that just said, it's going to be okay, we'll figure this out, we got this, like. And even up until his last moments, he'd be like, it's okay, we got this, and he was positive about it, we can figure this out, and I don't understand what you're saying, but I believe you.
See, more and more lately, just as an aside, I'm finding that some of my favorite characters are the one that can be best described as just a guy, like
Just a guy.
just regular guy, regular guy TM,
No
Everybody
psychic
else.
ability, no,
Yeah.
over the top, like he had interests in these kind of things, but overall he just showed up.
Mhm.
Like and it that's honestly, if 9 times out of 10, almost 10 times out of 10, do you want the friend that's a genius, or do you want the one that fucking shows up?
I'm sensing a theme with Sean Astin's characters that he plays, and
Yeah.
there's
Yep.
maybe
Yep.
there's
That's a
maybe a
good
more
point.
interesting, a deeper point to be made here, and
Mm-hmm.
I'll have to think about that. But
Yeah.
that, unfortunately, will have to be a discussion for another time, because we are at time. It's done. We're over. It's over now. We've reached the end.
Go home, everybody. What are you still doing here?
It's closing time.
Closing time.
First of all, Steve, thank you so much for joining us and having this chat. It was super fun. A lot of really interesting insights here. I think they were just a really fun discussion. I'm glad you were able to come. So,
Yeah.
No, I definitely really appreciate it. Again, this is extremely new to this, and I have watched you all play and build characters, and I did not get to say this during the stream, so I have to say it now. But watching Freeman play what seems to be himself as Mason, and then move over to Thunder and Blood of like bright shiny shoes and just didn't miss a beat, just upbeat, and it's just like dude's got range.
Yes, yes, yes. He is he is in fact the free range man. No,
no. Like I was just absolutely. I'm like, damn. All right.
Yeah. Okay. Look, if there's one thing that I can say, one of my favorite things that happened during the course of streaming our actual plays is right Drac with role playing, and so I played a character that's more like in the background and whatever, and then seeing him play Jace in Thunder and Blood, it's like, wow, okay, hold on a second, who is this guy? Is it a completely different role player? And one thing that I have always said about Freeman and his characters that he plays is that sorry, this is just what we're doing now at the end of the stream.
This is what we're doing now.
This is just what's happening. But one of the things I've always said about Freeman and his characters is I've played in a lot of games with Freeman with a lot of different characters, and I don't think that any two of his characters have been exactly the same, which is more than I can say for almost, because with everyone patterns emerge, right? Like people have a particular like general character and sort of demeanor that they like to play, but I don't think I've ever experienced that with Freeman. Like I've never, unless he was intentionally saying like, I really liked playing this character, I would like to bring it over into this other character,
Yep.
But yeah, so.
But yeah, definitely wanted to say that before, because, well, as much as Freeman is on Twitter, socialite in all forms of social media, and being on his Instagram account and OnlyFans.
Oh yeah,
Freeman being free on OnlyFans.
Yep.
That's
so
some stuff over there.
you have to drop a big tip if you expect him to see your message. So I mean, it's tough. So I had to say that during this time.
Absolutely.
The line at Gen Con to get the signature signed is always way too long, and now that he's gotten popular, it's like Critical Role. I'm not. I just can't front the 350 to see Freeman live.
Just sell out. Yeah.
If my cryptid form had blood right now, I'd be blushing. Thank you so much for the love.
There's literally like alien puppets in the back that are like, okay, make him blush. I don't have that.
We didn't install that yet.
That's a different model in the future.
Make him wave again.
All the pictures are blurry, but everyone's super into it.
Bigfoot is blurry.
Yes. I understood that reference. All right, everybody, we're gonna go. Steve, are you working on anything right now that you'd like to tell people about?
You will find me on Ramblemancy next week and every other week after that, because this is great. And on the next Ramblemancy show, long form, so I can be there. I will be on. No, but on Exquisite Corpse Presents later this month. In the last 2 weeks of March, we are going to be playing Space Train Space Heist. Imagine if the intro to Final Countdown was a show and add some Flash Gordon colors to it. That's the type of game we are going to be running with the big 80s and bright neon feel to it.
Nice.
And then we're going to be possibly looking into Mall Kids with Matthew Graveland and working on that to take a look at that. But then we're finishing up our tennis series on Rainbows and Razor Blades on Mondays, where I play a Vidalcan Grave Cleric who has not a minor drinking and drug problem.
All right.
So, but yeah, that's most you'll find me, and then you can find me on Twitter at W9Steve. If you have something where you think we need to play it, because our Va Nouveau Indie TTRB Roundtable is going to be continuing every month for the rest of the year. One of our other GMs is going to be taking over after this quarter, because breaks are important, folks. Breaks are important.
Yes, they are.
They very much
A
are.
hard-learned lesson here on Rule of Lore.
Going way back to the first thing we talked about on the stream tonight. Burnout is real. Take breaks.
Yes. If you take nothing else away from the stream, take that. All right. Next week, I think we are not having a Ramblemancy. Is that correct? I think that's probably true. We're yeah.
Yes.
I guess not. I think
we both our guest and one of us are also busy that evening.
Yes. So we will not be having Ramblemancy next week. However, a week after that, we will be joined by one Invert, who you have seen streaming around the interwebs, doing a lot of cool stuff. I think they're streaming Wolong today, which I think it sounds. I'm not a Souls-like guy, but like I do like wuxia, and I do think that's very cool. But
I've seen Invert play a lot of Souls likes, and I need to stop by more often. I remember there was a long period where they were playing a lot of Dark Souls. So I'm honestly, and I know they've been playing a bunch of Fallout recently too, which I know is of interest to you, Lucas. I'm psyched to chat with them.
Yeah.
Everybody can come lovingly boo Invert with us. I think my first question for Invert is probably going to be, so boo Invert.
But yeah, join us not next Friday, but the Friday after that. That is the 17th.
Yes,
the 17th. So we will of course always be around on the Discord. We're there, so if you're in the Discord and you got burning questions or things that you want to discuss, that's the place to do it. So we are gonna go, but we will see you next Ramblemancy. But if not, we'll see you the next time you decide to come roll with us. Good night, and good zone, everybody.
Bye.